Following orders, the crowd circumvented the bloodthirsty Asura clan, swiftly detoured, and charged straight toward the entrance of the loft world. Fang Chen also quickly packed up the items on site, not daring to linger for a moment. If the 10 sins of the Central Plains discovered his existence, it would likely bring a fatal disaster upon him as well. He carefully put away the space-time hourglass. The sand within was now just a thin quarter remaining, to be used only at the most critical moment. Then he also stowed away the angel's blade. Its light already dimmed quite a bit. On the verge of departure, Fang Chen glanced back meaningfully at the undying divine tree, then flashed into the crowd. Fang Chen, a pink silhouette, like a fledgling swallow returning to its nest, threw herself into his arms. It was Yu Mingju. She raised her lovely face, her eyes full of reproach, and said in a trembling voice, "I thought you were dead." Fang Chen's heart softened, and he felt some regret he shouldn't have let her learn about that prophecy of the old man Tianji. Since then, Yu Mingju had been anxious day and night, living in constant fear. If this continued, it would certainly become an ingrained knot in her heart, even a major obstacle to her future attainment of the Tao and spirit transformation realm. Fang Chen patted her head and gently consoled, "Don't worry needlessly. Have you forgotten the premise of the old man Tianji's prophecy? He said I would die at the hands of my most trusted person. As long as there is no one by my side, or no one I trust most, I can be safe and sound." Yu Mingju then had a sudden realization, secretly blaming herself for only worrying about Fang Chen's death and completely overlooking this premise. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes, broke into a smile, and said, all right, I'm being melodramatic again. Let's return to the Central Plains first and discuss your fate slowly. We'll work together to help you survive this calamity." Having said that, she grinned and hooked her arm around Fang Chen's, pressing most of her fragrant, soft body against him. But after just a few steps, Yu Mingju suddenly stepped on something unusual, causing her ankle to twist. Looking down, it turned out to be a little yellow furred rabbit, crouching there and lapping up the not yet dried yin rainwater on the ground. Yu Mingju was both annoyed and amused. She lifted her leg and kicked it flying, scolding, "Good rabbits don't block the way. Get lost." The little yellow rabbit kicked and feeling extremely aggrieved, rolled several times on the ground, then resentfully spread its 4 legs and scampered away. Fang Chen watched with an amused smile and laughed. Why bother with a wild rabbit? Wait. Such a desolate and lifeless place, the root of hell, where did a wild rabbit pop out from? Yu Mingju immediately came back to her senses and exclaimed, "Could that be some heaven and earth spiritual beast?" The two exchanged a glance and hurriedly turned back to investigate. But whether it was Fang Chen's spirit transformation, level perception, or Yu Mingju's heavenly Sun Kai observation technique, neither could find even a trace of the yellow rabbit. To evade our search, it seems it really is a wondrous beast of heaven and earth. Fang Chen was somewhat speechless. It practically delivered itself to your feet for you to step on, and you kicked it away. After Yu Mingju cultivated the heavenly Sun Kai observation technique, she had also seized a considerable amount of fortune. So much so that the spiritual objects of heaven and earth in this place were especially close to her, even obediently coming under her feet to be stepped on. Yu Mingju stuck out her tongue in embarrassment and said, "If something isn't lost, something new won't come. What is meant to be mine will still be stepped on by me. Let's go." Fang Chen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Only Yu Mingju, favored by heaven and earth and lacking nothing, could be so indifferent to a heaven-sent opportunity. He shook his head and helplessly followed the army as they retreated. But for some reason, Fang Chen always felt that they had forgotten something extremely important on this journey. Time flew by, and half a day later. They had a journey full of alarms, but no mishaps, and finally arrived at the Loft World. Hong Xiu had arrived first with the Asura army, but the number of troops had sharply decreased by well over 2,000, and the wounded were countless. It must be noted that even in the earlier battle near the Abyss, they had not suffered such devastating casualties. Looking at the expressions of those Asura clansmen, each showed hatred, their steel teeth clenched tight. Clearly, they had encountered one of the 10 sins of the Central Plains, who brutally slaughtered a number of their kin. The Central Plains crowd watched with secret awe, all inwardly rejoicing that Fang Chen had foresight. Thanks to his warning not to travel together with the Asura clan, otherwise when they met with misfortune, they themselves would inevitably suffer collateral damage. "You've finally returned." The Grand Libationer of Taking Great Prefecture stepped forward, looking at the noticeably diminished Central Plains army with a mournful expression. It went without saying that their journey had been extremely perilous. Fang Chen said, Grand Libationer, let's discuss it after we return to the Central Plains. I'm afraid the Hell Realm is about to descend into great chaos. The 10 sins of the Central Plains would be delighted to see the Hell Realm turned upside down, and they would never be satisfied with just killing a few Asura emperors. The Grand Libationer, the Fang Mountain first-rank pavilion master, and other sages were firmly guarding the entrance of the Loft World, strictly preventing any of the 10 sins or Asura army from infiltrating. Hearing this, they dared not delay, and immediately opened the passage, allowing the Central Plains army to enter in quick succession. Hong Xiu pondered for a moment. Once all the Central Plains sages withdrew, the 9 divisions of the Asura would be completely exposed, with no one to protect them. This place was absolutely not to be lingered in. She made a prompt decision and ordered the Hell Realm army split into 100 small squads and dispersed toward Fengdu. At this point, they could only resort to this desperate measure. Whichever squad ran into the 10 sins of the Central Plains would just have to count themselves unlucky. The Asura army immediately broke into smaller units and swiftly departed, while Hong Xiu and the young master of Snow City brought the Asura emperor along at the very rear. By this time, the Central Plains army had mostly withdrawn. Outside the entrance, only 1,000 powerful figures remained, orderly retreating into the Loft World. Once they fully returned, this expedition into the Hell Realm would officially come to an end. However, suddenly a heaven-shaking, earth-shattering quake erupted between heaven and earth. Countless volcanoes on the ground trembled and erupted wildly in unison, their skies scorching magma dyeing the entire firmament red. In the sky, innumerable horrifying folds appeared, layer upon layer, pressing down towards this place. Such a terrifying momentum was second only to the earlier descent of the undying divine tree. The 8 Grand Libationers seemed to sense something simultaneously, all teleporting together to stand in a line, blocking the army like a mountain range. The Grand Libationer of taking Great Prefecture's gaze was solemn to the extreme. Go quickly. Even when facing the 8 prison Asura emperors and Asura emperor forces several times their number earlier, they had not been this tense. Fang Chen felt his throat tighten, swallowing quietly. The thing he worried about most had finally come true. He knew what was coming. Under Fang Chen's abruptly constricted gaze, on the extremely distant horizon, 9 suns rose in a row, lined up side by side. That was the 9 Sun Giant Emperor. Fang Chen's pupils constricted violently. In the Hell Realm, there was actually a 9 Sun Giant Emperor that no one could handle, moving about freely. The great venerables from various prefectures looked up at the 9 suns, and one by one understood what they were about to face, their faces all showing undisguisable fear. Golden Scale Great Venerable cried out in horror, 9 Sun Giant Emperor, how did he come to attack here? Didn't the Hell Realm already gain the upper hand? Why would a 9 Sun Giant Emperor suddenly attack this place? Fang Chen sucked in a breath of cold air and said gravely, it's the 10 sins of the Central Plains. The thing he worried about most had finally happened. The 10 sins of the Central Plains had not only incited rebellion here, but also created massive chaos in the main battlefield of Fengdu. Just like during the Central Plains' golden age 1,000 years ago, when the 2 sides were evenly matched, 10 top-tier combatants at the sage level stabbed them in the back. The inevitable consequence was the total collapse of the ancient giant faction. The fact that the 9 Sun Giant Emperor could come here alone was proof enough that the Asura Emperor level of the Hell Realm had already collapsed. Those Asura Emperors might not all be dead, but they were powerless to contend against the Giant Emperors and the 10 sins of the Central Plains any longer. And once such a collapse at this level occurred, the main battlefields of the Asura kings and orifice opening Asuras were likely in jeopardy as well. There was a good chance that the Hell Realm's army had already been routed by the ancient giants in the past half-day and was frantically fleeing in all directions. The Hell Realm had already descended into chaos. Quick, retreat as many as you can. The Grand Libationer of taking Great Prefecture was extremely grave. The 16 sages working together were not afraid of the 9 Sun Giant Emperor themselves. But the problem was that there were still over 1,000 troops here, blocked at the entrance of the Loft World. The moment they clashed, the destructive shockwaves unleashed would engulf the remaining armies entirely. Here, there was no ancient giant army. The 9 Sun Giant Emperor would never cooperate to shift the battlefield toward the Sky Curtain. Quite the opposite. He would exploit the battle's aftershocks to annihilate the last remnants of the Central Plains. Strike, Taikang Grand Wine Priest gave a low shout, and with the 8 Grand Wine Priests teleporting out, they boldly charged toward the horizon's edge. The remaining sages did not hesitate, following closely behind. They could only strive with all their might to contain the battlefield beyond the horizon, minimizing the fallout here. Yet, Fang Chen, having witnessed the 9 Sun Giant Emperor's might firsthand, understood that even the residual ripples from a clash beyond the horizon could easily slay everyone here. Leave now. His expression grim, he produced a cloth sack, swept over 200 Central Plains experts into it with his mana, and instantly teleported them to the Attic world. The honored great beings also exerted their full power, each employing their own methods to whisk away groups of experts and frantically flee into the Attic world. Even so, over 100 were left behind, unable to escape in time. At that very moment, the clash between the 9 Sun Giant Emperor and the Grand Wine Priests erupted without suspense. Unimaginable curses and the force of laws instantly tore vast swaths of the Hell Realm apart. The sky curtain was ripped open, revealing a tremendous void spanning tens of thousands of feet. The boundless earth was uprooted whole by spatial force, turned upside down, and swallowed into that void. More terrifyingly, the aftermath woven from curses and laws surged outward in all directions like an apocalyptic tsunami. Wherever it passed, the void was utterly torn asunder. Only those protected by this world's artifacts could barely withstand the onslaught of that destructive tide. Fang Chen's face paled drastically as he suddenly looked down at the over 100 Central Plains soldiers about to be caught, his pupils instantly constricted into pinpricks of alarm. Amidst that crowd, he spotted Liu Ruxu, Yu Mingzhu, and the Bodhisattva Ping Shen. The chaos earlier had been absolute. He and the honored great beings had been frantically evacuating people, unable to tell anyone apart. He never imagined that among those left behind would be Liu Ruxu and Yu Mingzhu. A flash of resolve crossed Fang Chen's eyes. Without a shred of hesitation, his figure turned to a streak of afterimages as he fiercely charged out of the Attic world. Behind him, immediate cries of shock and anger erupted from the honored great beings and Central Plains experts. The devastating aftershock was already surging forth like a raging tsunami. This charge of his was practically a death sentence. Fang Chen hurled back another sack, this one filled with 300 Asura Holy Son devotees, flinging it fiercely behind him. And his own figure vanished completely from the horrified gazes of the onlookers. When he reappeared, he stood proudly among those 100+ experts. The terrifying tsunami of aftershocks crashed down right after, swallowing him and the 100 others whole. When that wave of destruction surged into the distance and everyone urgently looked over, their hearts all sank. Where Fang Chen and the 100+ experts had stood, there remained only a heart-rending, shattered void. Even the world's barrier had been punched through. What chance did their mortal flesh have? Most likely, they had all been reduced to ashes in that instant. A wave of immense grief swept over the crowd. They had barely survived the Hell Realm, only to fall at the very moment before dawn. Master Zhenyun closed her eyes deeply, her voice drifting as she murmured, "One after another, they die for others, never once considering me. I am your wife too." In her mind flashed the image of Master Qianjiao, cradling her father's body as she leaped into the void suddenly. She understood her state of mind. When the heart holds nothing left to cherish, this world becomes a place one could take or leave. She slowly opened her eyes, gazing at the deathly silent void below, and stepped forward. But her foot had barely moved when an abrupt cry from behind rooted her to the spot. Master Starfire is still alive. She whipped her head around to find Minjai Asura King. He was staring fixedly into the depths of the void, as if seeing an incredibly distant scene, his expression surging with barely contained excitement as he shouted, "Yes, he's alive, but the situation's dire. He's drifting deeper into the void. I can barely see him anymore." Deep within the void, Fang Chen, only the upper half of his body remaining, was swept away by the violent void turbulence, hurtling toward that unknown darkness. His left hand clutched a cloth sack in a death grip, his right held a void fishing rod. The other end of the fishing line was firmly hooked onto a heavy, pitch-black great cauldron. Man and cauldron drifting together toward the void's depths, depending on each other. It turned out that at the moment of destruction, he had a flash of inspiration and thought of a single sanctuary, the void itself. Coincidentally, he possessed a supreme treasure that allowed swift escape into the void, the 9 Dragon Demon Cauldron. Thus, just before the aftershock struck, he timely drew the crowd into the sack, decisively activated the 9 Dragon Demon Cauldron to connect with the void, and leaped in. Regrettably, the aftershock's overbearing force still reached into the void, crushing his lower body directly. Even more tormenting for Fang Chen was that this wound stemmed from intertwined law and curse, rendering his life essence arts useless. Enduring bone-grinding agony, he moved Yu Mingzhu out of the sack, forcing words through clenched teeth. "Mingju, it's up to you." As soon as Yu Mingju was released, she anxiously scanned the surroundings. Seeing Fang Chen still alive, she was instantly overcome with surprise and joy, but then, noticing his horrifically grievous injuries, she hurriedly yanked a sack from her waist. With a thought, she urgently called out, "Big white rabbit, come out." A flash of light appeared, and a large white rabbit, sturdier than a person, materialized in midair. It blinked its big red eyes, thoroughly bewildered. But the very next moment, it shuddered violently, because Yu Mingju yanked a huge tuft of fur from its belly, making it quiver in pain. Yu Mingju hastily pressed the rabbit fur onto Fang Chen's wounds. The gushing blood stopped immediately, and the injury began to slowly mend. Yu Mingju's brows knit tightly as she fretted. So slow, that must hurt terribly. She turned and with a few quick swipes, ripped a wash basin-sized clump of fur off the big white rabbit. Enraged by the plucking, the rabbit spun and bit down on Yu Mingju's clothes. Infuriated, Yu Mingju scolded, "This is my man, what's a little pain to you? Let go, or we're having rabbit head for dinner tonight." Seeing his injuries already recovering, Fang Chen gently dissuaded her, "Don't bully it. I can endure for a bit." Yu Mingju would hear none of it. She hurriedly and lovingly pressed the large mound of rabbit fur onto the wound, and Fang Chen's severed legs actually regenerated at visible speed. Still not appeased, she grabbed the rabbit's hind leg and brought it to Fang Chen's mouth, urgently saying, "Just bite it directly. It'll work even better." Fang Chen stared blankly at the plump, furry rabbit leg thrust right before his lips. Yu Mingju explained, "It's a pill. It's meant to be eaten." "A pill?" Fang Chen's gaze at the thrashing, struggling giant white rabbit remained puzzled, and his brain short-circuited for a long moment. Then, as if thunder roared through his mind, his voice cracked with shock. It's an 8th-grade heavenly pill. Years ago, ancient heart sage of the medicine god Hall had left resolutely due to ideological differences with the other 3 sages regarding the refinement of 8th-grade heavenly pills. Later, ancient heart sage legacy and belongings were inherited by the old rustic of Oblivion. Ultimately, this inheritance came into Yu Mingju's hands. Glancing around to ensure no one was nearby, she leaned in, her voice low and grave. "My master warned me never to tell outsiders, lest it bring deadly calamity. It is indeed the 8th-grade heavenly pill that ancient heart sage personally refined 1,000 years ago. Its effect is that it has a certain chance to help a sage of the 3 calamities realm break through to the saint realm." "What?" Fang Chen felt a surge of blood rush upward. He bolted upright, staring with utter shock at the lively, bouncing big white rabbit. Breaking through to the saint realm. He simply could not believe that this rabbit was such a heaven-defying existence. Yu Mingju covered her mouth and giggled, her eyes sparkling. "Seems you're no better than me. When my master first told me, I didn't react nearly as dramatically as you." The awe in Fang Chen's eyes did not diminish in the slightest. Because the more one understood the saint realm, the more one realized just how heaven-defying the big white rabbit was. A single qualification to become a world lord could trigger a war between 2 worlds, and that was merely a qualification. To truly storm the saint realm, the resources required would be nothing short of appalling. Yet this seemingly harmless white rabbit actually has a chance to assault the saint realm. Its heaven-defying effect rivals even the sacred infant upon the primordial void ancient tree. His eyes shimmered with disbelief as he murmured to himself, could ancient heart sage's alchemy skill have already reached 8-star soul master back then? That progress is absurdly fast, isn't it? But soon his gaze inadvertently swept across the 9-dragon demon cauldron nearby, and he instantly understood. It was the 9-dragon demon cauldron. The reason this cauldron only had its final use left, it seems, was because ancient heart sage had used it. He was the true master of the 9-dragon demon cauldron. Later, after changing hands several times, the 9-dragon demon cauldron found its way into a cave dwelling beneath the snowy mountain cliff. Thus, Fang Chen was able to form a fateful bond with Yu Mingju. Fang Chen let out a long sigh of both amusement and exasperation. No wonder a single strand of this white rabbit's fur could heal wounds. So it's actually an 8th-grade heavenly pill. I should have realized sooner. Yu Mingju giggled and waved her hand generously. "From now on, it's yours." Even though this was a rare world-defying 8th-grade heavenly pill, Yu Mingju gave it away without the slightest reluctance. Fang Chen was momentarily stunned. He raised a hand and gently stroked her delicate cheek, softly saying, "Silly girl, what emotionless, wild elder left you is something fated for you. Besides, my days are numbered. What use would I have for it? Let's go, we must hurry back. If we drift too far, I fear we'll be completely lost in the void." Now that his leg injuries had healed, the most urgent matter was to immediately return to the middle continent. He flipped his hand and retrieved a wide feather cloak, the very treasure that could traverse the void feather wings. He draped the wings over himself, and the chaotic void currents around him immediately flowed around his body as if gaining sentience, allowing him to float steadily in the void without being affected in the slightest. He silently marveled, truly miraculous. Once back, I'll use the dog bowl to duplicate another set, aiming to equip everyone in the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion with one. Of course, there'll be one more unlucky fellow in the pavilion as well. Just then, he unexpectedly discovered that the white rabbit could also tread on the void with all 4 hooves, completely unaffected by the void. Yu Mingzhu, holding onto its leg, was likewise spared the erosion of the void. This 8th grade heavenly pill truly had some hidden depths. It could even protect others as they traversed the void. Fang Chen turned his head and asked with a light smile, "Would you rather go with the white rabbit or with me?" Yu Mingzhu looked at Fang Chen's not so large feather garment and said hesitantly, "Can it carry both of us?" Fang Chen spread his arms with a warm smile. "Just hold you from behind." From behind? Holding? She suddenly recalled how not long ago she had inadvertently overheard Gong Kei and Fairy Yunsheng privately discussing bedroom matters, vaguely catching that Fang Chen liked to hold them from behind. Her cheeks instantly flushed rosy, and she stammered bashfully, I can just ride the white rabbit." But then she stiffened her neck and feigned calmness as she shifted tone. "However, since you've so sincerely invited me, I'll reluctantly go with you." After saying that, she leaped into Fang Chen's embrace. Unexpectedly, the white rabbit chomped down on the hem of her skirt, and its eyes kept darting toward its own back, clearly meaning, "You can ride me." Yu Mingzhu backhandedly smashed a dainty fist onto its forehead and cursed under her breath, "Clueless thing, get back in." She deftly opened the sack and unceremoniously shoved the white rabbit back inside. Then she walked over to Fang Chen as if nothing had happened. Fang Chen smiled as he gently wrapped his arms around her from behind, pressing her petite and soft body tightly against his chest, then closed the wide feather garment around them. Yu Mingzhu only exposed a small head flushed bright red, her eyes so shy they nearly brimmed with mist. She felt as though she were wrapped in a ball of heat, her body so weak and limp she couldn't muster the slightest strength. Fang Chen's mind stirred, and he loudly declared, "Let's go." The feathers on the garment instantly lit up, releasing a unique power that resisted the chaotic void currents. The two transformed into a milky, white streak, speeding away through the dark void. Not long after, they arrived before the world barrier of the Hell Realm. Yu Mingzhu asked worriedly, "The Hell Realm is in chaos. Returning to the middle continent through the Hell Realm, isn't that very dangerous?" Fang Chen sighed helplessly and explained, "Everything is peaceful on the middle continent side, but the world barrier there is too stable. No void fissures will appear in a short time. For now, we can only take a detour through the war-torn Hell Realm." Only then did Yu Mingzhu nod in sudden understanding. At that moment, the world barrier ahead shattered with a thunderous crash as a blood-red spear of a giant Emperor King brutally punched through the realm wall. Countless shattered earth fragments were swept in, along with torn temple structures and some monks draped in Kasaya robes. Temples and monks. Fang Chen was momentarily dazed. Why would there be monks in the Hell Realm? But he immediately understood. This was the Buddhist domain. He had almost forgotten that the Hell Realm had an extremely special realm lord, the Buddha. That was a supreme being who single-handedly created the Sutra of Suppressing Hell and Calming Souls. The Buddha was originally a great bodhisattva from the middle continent who went to the Hell Realm with the Sutra of Suppressing Hell and Calming Souls to liberate resentful spirits, ultimately attaining Buddhahood and establishing the Buddhist domain. They had coincidentally returned right near the Buddhist domain of the Hell Realm. Gazing at those monks being dragged into the void, Fang Chen hesitated. Should he save them? Nowadays, the middle continent and Hell Realm had ceased hostilities. They were no longer enemies. Furthermore, the Buddha originated from the middle continent. If his disciples were in trouble and he could save a batch, perhaps he could earn some goodwill karma within the Buddhist domain. He no longer hesitated and darted forward. While guarding against possible attacks from the giant Emperor King above, he stuffed all 6 monks into his sack. The situation was urgent, so he had no time to carefully examine the cultivation realms or conditions of those monks. After securing them, he decisively cast the selfless purifying dust art and concealed himself among the suspended temple structures. He would wait for the giant Emperor King's presence above the Buddhist domain to vanish, then quietly crawl back through the fissure. Before long, there were no more tremors from above, and the terrifying aura of the giant Emperor King swiftly dissipated. The opportunity had arrived. Just as Fang Chen's mind stirred and he was about to activate the feather garment, a terrifying figure radiating the aura of an Asura emperor shot like lightning ahead, diving into the fissure first. Though it was merely a fleeting instant, Fang Chen still recognized that figure. Fang Chen was greatly startled. Asura Holy Son. This guy had already been expelled by the Hell Realm Lord, yet he dared to return and even slipped into the Buddhist domain. His purpose was self-evident. It had to be for the Sutra of suppressing hell and calming souls. Fang Chen even somewhat admired his courage and audacity. Right now was precisely the moment of great upheaval in the Hell Realm. The Realm Lords had no time to concern themselves with a single trespassing Asura Holy Son. This was the perfect time to steal the Sutra of suppressing hell and calming souls. Fang Chen's gaze turned solemn. If the Asura Holy Son obtained the Sutra of suppressing hell and calming souls with his ruthless methods, it wouldn't be long before he successfully stepped into the 3 Kalam Ites realm. At that time, if he returned to exact revenge on the Middle Continent, it would be an earth-shattering catastrophe. He must be stopped. But how could he possibly be his match? Rubbing his chin, Fang Chen suddenly thought of something, and a sly smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. You tore open 2 realms and caused such huge trouble for my Middle Continent, then I'll give you a little trouble of my own. A little trouble. Yu Mingzhu immediately perked up upon hearing this. She knew that when Fang Chen said little, he definitely meant something big. She asked excitedly, "What are you going to do?" Fang Chen smiled mysteriously and uttered 4 words, "Shut the door and beat the dog." He immediately took out the moon mirror and swiftly began writing on it. "Pick a name. Is anyone there?" Soon the moon mirror responded. "West Palace, Zhao Fan, where are you? How are you now?" "Pick a name. I'm fine. Everyone else is alive too. Don't worry. By the way, has the Hell Realm Lord contacted our Middle Continent? Flower Bush, Senior Uncle truly has divine foresight. The Nirvana Realm Lord is right beside us. She wants to ask our Middle Continent to activate the Truce Monument, and the Grand Libationer says only you can decide." Fang Chen nodded slightly. All of this was within his expectations. The Buddhist domain has been repeatedly assaulted by the giant sovereigns. It is clear that the main battlefield at Fengdu has already collapsed, and the ancient giants have long invaded every corner of the Hell Realm. At present, the situation in the Hell Realm is truly precarious, the only path to survival being to besiege the Middle Earth to activate the war exemption, steal, and expel the ancient giants. Fang Chen immediately replied, "Pick a good name. Let the other shore Realm Lord talk to me." Soon, a line of cold, unsigned words appeared within the moon mirror. "Your life is really tough. You still didn't die." Fang Chen curled a corner of his mouth and replied, "Pick a good name. If I really died, Sister Bayan would be beside herself with worry." "Cut the crap. Since my Hell Realm is already a vassal of your Middle Earth, you should take responsibility for us. Quickly expel the ancient giants." Fang Chen laughed. This was plainly begging with an attitude. He replied without any courtesy. "Pick a good name, no problem, but my master Kiki won't allow me to be used for free. That would disgrace her." "Kiki is your master. No wonder your heart is darker than the sky of the Hell Realm. What do you want?" The other shore Realm Lord massaged her temples, inwardly warning herself that no matter how harsh the conditions Fang Chen proposed next, she must remain calm. Fang Chen's reply soon appeared on the moon mirror. "Pick a good name. We're all acquaintances. I won't make an outrageous demand. How about this? Send 100 Ashura sovereigns to our Middle Earth to be used as beasts of burden for 100 years or so, just as a token gesture." The moon mirror fell silent for a long while. The other shore Realm Lord said nothing, and even the other members of the moon mirror dared not speak. Fang Chen forcefully tapped the moon mirror and muttered under his breath, "Is the signal bad in the void?" Yu Mingzhu covered her small mouth, her eyes round with astonishment, exclaiming, with that demand, even ghosts would be scared away. Indeed, apart from the Grand Wine Sacrificer, the Middle Earth did not even have 10 sages. Fang Chen had asked for 100 Ashura sovereigns right from the start, and explicitly demanded they be used as draft animals. If she were the other shore Realm Lord, she'd be so furious she'd smash the moon mirror on the spot. Only after a good while did a reply, suppressed with rage, come through the moon mirror. 100 Ashura sovereigns. Why not just give you the entire Hell Realm?" Fang Chen replied without blushing or his heart skipping a beat. "Pick a good name, fine, and throw in 8 Realm Lords as a bonus." The other shore Realm Lord's chest heaved with anger, her silver teeth clenched tight. She had thought that the Middle Land Treaty was already Fang Chen's bottom line. She never expected it was merely his normal performance. She took a deep breath and replied through gritted teeth. Send one Asura sovereign to serve the Middle Earth for a year. Additionally, you select a trustworthy 5, Crown King, and within 1 month, this realm lord will personally help her break through to the Asura sovereign realm. Refuse and forget it, anyway. Before she even finished speaking, Fang Chen's reply came back at lightning speed. Pick a good name, deal, no backing out. The other Shore realm lord felt a sudden tightness in her chest, and her figure swayed along with it. From 100 down to 1, Fang Chen had actually agreed readily. It was plain to see that he had never intended to extort anything from the Hell Realm at all. He had just casually opened the lion's mouth to blackmail her, if he could get something. Gee, great. If not, he lost nothing. This damn profiteer. She replied through clenched teeth. Fine, it's a deal. Activate the war exemption stele. Pick a good name, Kingxian. Inform the Grand Wine Sacrificer to proceed. In the void, Fang Chen put away the moon mirror, a satisfied smile spreading across the corner of his mouth. Yu Mingzhu couldn't help asking. He agreed just like that. Fang Chen reached out and tapped her nose, smiling. If the ancient giants occupy the Hell Realm and then invade the Middle Earth directly through the Pavilion World, what then? So even if the Hell Realm Lord hadn't begged me, I would have acted to disperse the ancient giants. Now we've gained a free Asura sovereign, plus an additional spot for breaking through to Asura sovereign, which is already a huge profit. Only thing is, I wonder what kind of Asura sovereign the Hell Realm will send to the Middle Earth, probably the most useless one they have. Yu Mingzhu suddenly saw the light, right? The Hell Realm was still connected to the Middle Earth. When one loses, both lose. When one prospers, both prosper. The other Shore Realm Lord, unable to keep her cool, had come to the Middle Earth first for help, and could only obediently let Fang Chen take a bite out of her while she was in distress. Yu Mingzhu quickly urged, let's hurry back to the Hell Realm then. Otherwise, once the ancient giants retreat and the sage-level battles cease, we won't be able to find any new cracks. Fang Chen nodded and urged the void feather garment, darting toward the crack. But just as he was about to cross the crack, his gaze shifted and his figure abruptly stopped. He summoned the cracked Immortal King Indestructible Bell, shielding the two of them securely within, and at the same time took out a jade talisman, within which was sealed the reversal law of that old dog Sixin. Then he even brought out the space-time hourglass and without hesitation activated it. Yu Mingzhu's gaze froze, and she asked nervously, what's wrong? Fang Chen narrowed his eyes and whispered, just a precaution, that Asura Saint Child is a scheming fellow. Perhaps his appearance just now was deliberately shown to me. Though he wasn't sure if this was a trap, when dealing with the Asura Saint Child, exercising 12 parts of caution would never be wrong. After making thorough preparations, he then urged the void feather garment and carefully crossed through the crack. The moment Fang Chen and Yu Mingzhu arrived in the Hell Realm, a dense, overwhelming Buddha light surged toward them, the very solemn aura unique to the Buddhist domain. However, before they could even steady themselves, a colossal demon claw that blotted out the sky had already been waiting, and with world-destroying force, it smashed down upon them. The Asura Saint Child's bone-chilling voice then came coldly, "You little scum, I've been waiting for you." Upon reflection, at his level as an Asura sovereign, how could he not have detected Fang Chen and Yu Mingzhu's presence in the void? He merely harbored deep wariness of the 9-colored crystal on Fang Chen's person, unwilling to confront it head-on for fear of bearing unforeseeable risks. He pretended to ignore Fang Chen, letting him lower his guard, and the instant he returned, he launched this unexpected, fatal strike. This move was indeed extremely effective. Fang Chen indeed hadn't had time to bring out that 9-colored crystal. The demon palm, charged with destructive pressure, struck Fang Chen squarely and viciously. But just when it seemed Fang Chen would be obliterated under this palm, a bizarre scene unfolded. The descending demon palm seemed to reverse in time, forcefully curling back on itself. Seeing this, the Asura Saint Child was first stunned, then laughed coldly. Time reversal law. You actually took precautions against me. He paused, his tone growing even icier. Indeed, if you were this easy to kill, I'd instead suspect you weren't the real Fang Chen. However, you'd best pray you have enough time reversal law on you. As his words fell, the Asura Saint Child's face instantly turned frigid, and a suffocating power of causality radiated out soundlessly, heading straight for Fang Chen. This was a direct causal attack at the sovereign level. How could Fang Chen's current cultivation possibly withstand it? Even the Immortal King Indestructible Bell would definitely be unable to resist. Yu Mingzhu's heart sank abruptly. Her eyes rapidly circulated 9-colored hues, straining with all her might to locate a place of thriving fortune in this pitch-black, abyss-like world, seeking a thread of survival. L for the two of them. Yet under the Asura sovereign's strike, the whole world had turned as black as an abyss, with no path to life in any direction. This was simply an existence they could not contend with at this moment. Fang Chen, however, remained very calm. He unhurriedly spoke. "Hold your hand. We are no longer enemies now, but allies." The Asura Saint Child's gaze turned slightly. He dispelled the destructive demon palm with a wave and coldly snorted. "Allies." Fang Chen shrugged and said confidently, "That's right. I'm being hunted by the Hell Realm, and you've been expelled from the Hell Realm by it as well. Both of us now share a common enemy. Why don't we cooperate for once?" "Cooperate?" the Asura Saint Child scoffed, his face full of disdain. "What is there to cooperate with you about? Your death would be the best cooperation." His resentment toward Fang Chen had long been etched into his bones. If not for Fang Chen, the Middle Earth would have already fallen. If not for Fang Chen, he would have long since used the scripture of suppressing hells and pacifying souls to deliver all the souls of the Middle Earth. This brat had ruined his 1,000-year plan. Even tearing him to 10,000 pieces would hardly quell the hatred in his heart. How could he possibly cooperate with him? While the words were still rolling in his mouth, his killing intent had already erupted, striking out ahead of his words. Fang Chen, unhurried and steady, replied, "But what if you cannot find the prison suppressing, soul-pacifying scripture? Though my copy of the scripture has been destroyed, all its contents are stored right here." He raised a finger and tapped his own head. This was his greatest trump card against the Asura Holy Son. The killing intent brewing within the Asura Holy Son abruptly halted. His eyes rolled slyly, and he sneered, "Then why should I bother going to the Buddha domain? I can just capture and torture you to get the answers, can't I?" Hearing this, Fang Chen's smile didn't fade. "If you trust me, I can write it down for you right now." The Asura Holy Son's expression flickered unpredictably. His thoughts raced. Fang Chen was cunning by nature. How could he possibly write down the true scripture? If he gave a fake one, and because of that, he missed the chance to infiltrate the Buddha's dojo to find the real scripture, wouldn't he lose out on both ends, like drawing water with a bamboo basket, all in vain? Having suffered greatly at Fang Chen's hands many times, he ultimately believed that finding the genuine version himself was the most reliable. As for the contents in Fang Chen's mind, that could only serve as a fallback, a second best option. His gaze flickered, and he finally suppressed his murderous aura, asking in a deep voice, "Speak. How do you propose we cooperate?" Fang Chen laughed. "Aren't you planning to steal the prison suppressing soul-pacifying scripture? Then I'll also take the opportunity to acquire a few Buddhist treasures. You possess the strength of an Asura emperor, but by my side, I have a wife who knows the Heavenly Sun's Kai observation technique, and a friend wose cultivation has reached the Asura realm. Some things you cannot find, some places you cannot go, they can." The Asura Holy Son couldn't help but ponder. He had indeed worried earlier about the difficulty of finding Buddhist treasures, or even if found, the predicament of being unable to take them without Buddhist divine abilities. From this perspective, the people Fang Chen brought might truly prove highly useful. He nodded slowly, but then fixed his gaze on Fang Chen and pressed. "Cooperation is fine, but if you run off afterward, where am I to find you for the contents of the prison? Suppress. Sing soul pacifying scripture. How about this?" As he spoke, he slowly extended his palm. A bizarre insect, entirely blood, red and shaped like a nail, slowly drilled its way out from the flesh of his palm. "You will embed this insect into your body. Once you hand over the contents of the prison, suppressing, soul-pacifying scripture afterward, I will remove it for you." Fang Chen's eyes narrowed involuntarily. This thing was not unfamiliar to him. That year, when Qizing controlled those rogue cultivators to go underground in the heavenly secret pavilion, he had used exactly this kind of insect. This was the blood insect used by the bloodthirsty Asura clan to control puppets. However, the power of the Asura Holy Son's blood insect far surpassed that of Qizing's. Its sinister and ferocious nature was enough to easily control the life and death of any deity transformation cultivator. The Asura Holy Son was indeed not easy to fool, so now, should he grit his teeth and accept, or simply refuse? If he refused, they would likely fall out on the spot. Just as he was hesitating, a long, lost-burning sensation suddenly came from his chest. It was the remnant soul of the Earth Phoenix Great Sage. Having not encountered any insects for a long time, that 5-colored rooster was so idle that even its eggs ached. Now, suddenly detecting such a formidable insect, it immediately grew so excited that the heat persisted to the point that even Fang Chen's deity transformation body felt a faint, scorching pain from the burning. Fang Chen's heart immediately settled. Since the Earth Phoenix Great Sage could counter this insect, what was there to fear? His eyes rolled, and he immediately thumped his chest, declaring righteously, "No problem, the most important thing for a person is integrity."
However,
What if afterward you refuse to remove this insect and even use it to harm me? What then? How about this? You leave a precious treasure with me as collateral. After the cooperation ends, you take out the insect, and I return the treasure. We'll owe each other nothing, and there will be no mutual suspicion. A surge of ferocity flickered in the Asura Holy Son's eyes. This little bastard actually dared to haggle with him. But thinking of the contents of that prison-suppressing, soul-pacifying scripture in his mind, he could only endure for the time being. After much deliberation, the Asura Holy Son hesitantly took out a long, slender jet-black chain. At one end of the chain was attached a heavy collar. With some reluctance, he grunted, "This item will be left with you, as collateral for now." Fang Chen couldn't help but frown and asked in puzzlement, "What is this, a leash for walking a dog?" The Asura Holy Son let out a cold snort and explained, "Years ago, I deceived the compassionate sage into exploring a mysterious ruin beyond the heavens with me. As a result, he came back severely injured, and he also brought back an enigmatic little spirit beast whose origins were unfathomable. Later, that little spirit beast escaped, but this chain was left behind." Fang Chen's heart jolted. The compassionate sage had once said that little Killen was his spirit beast. Could it be that the little spirit beast he brought back from the extraterrestrial ruin was little Killen? He examined the collar's size more closely, and indeed it matched the thickness of little Killen's neck exactly. So this thing was truly used to bind little Killen back then. Yet he remained dubious in his heart. Could this thing really be considered a treasure? To his surprise, a solemn expression appeared on the Asura Holy Son's face. He said gravely, "Do not underestimate this chain. I once tested it on the Heavenly Net Sage. After fastening it, the Heavenly Net Sage, who was in his full prime, instantly lost all his power and became a complete mortal. I had planned to use it to enslave another sage from the Middle Land, but unfortunately there was no suitable target afterward. Now I am temporarily leaving it with you. Do not lose it, for I will have great use for you in the future." A huge question mark popped up on Fang Chen's forehead. He thought to himself, "Really, is that necessary? Little Killen is so fragile, a single slap could knock it over, flailing on the ground. Was such a heaven-defying chain needed to deal with it?" He took the chain in his hand, feeling only a cool sensation, with no trace of pressure. This thing wasn't even considered a magical artifact. Fang Chen looked up, smacked his lips with a face full of skepticism. "I just can't believe it. Wait a moment, let me find someone to test it." He patted the spatial mirror at his waist and called out cheerfully, "Empress Sis, come out for a moment. There's a great good fortune for you." The Asura Empress stepped out with a look of surprise. When her gaze swept over the Asura Holy Son, her pupils constricted sharply, and she immediately faced him as if confronting a formidable enemy. Fang Chen waved his hand, smiling reassuringly. "Don't be afraid, we are now life and death good brothers." Brothers. The Asura Empress looked stunned, thinking that indeed, things reverse when pushed to extremes. Mortal enemies, at their limit, could actually become good brothers. She helplessly shook her head and asked, "So, what's the good thing?" Fang Chen said, with a beaming smile, "Close your eyes. I'll give you a necklace to wear." "Necklace?" A strange ripple arose in the Asura Empress's heart. Such a personal item wasn't it only given between men and women. Even her husband had never given her a necklace before. She originally wanted to refuse, but looking at Fang Chen's sincere expression and recalling the bond of life and death they shared at the bottom of the abyss, she ultimately harbored a secret anticipation and gently closed her eyes. In the next instant, a cool touch leisurely encircled her neck. Before she could open her eyes to see, suddenly, all the strength in her body seemed to be drained away into thin air, and she collapsed limply to the ground on the spot. That wasn't all. Immediately after, her limbs completely lost control. Her hands pressed firmly on the ground, her knees knelt, and her body involuntarily arched slightly, raising her full curves high. How to put it, at this moment the Asura Empress truly seemed to have become a four-legged pet. However, a woman of peerless beauty assuming such a posture was truly an unsightly scene. Fang Chen held the gleaming, chilly chain, his face full of surprise. It actually works. The Asura Holy Son indeed hadn't lied to him. This was truly a heavy treasure capable of tightly binding even a sage. The Asura Holy Son stood with his hands behind his back and said flatly, "How is it? Enough to collateral a little life." Fang Chen nodded repeatedly with a laugh. Enough. Rest assured leaving it with me. I guarantee no mishaps." After all, this thing now bore the surname Fang. Only now did the Asura Empress belatedly understand that this scoundrel Fang Chen had used her to test the chain's effect. She was so angry on the spot that her shapely chest heaved violently. Furious and humiliated, she shouted sharply, "Fang Chen, if I trust you again, I'm a dog." She silently cursed herself. How could she have believed that bastard Fang Chen would have any good news for her? Had her brain been filled with water? Fang Chen coughed twice dryly, quickly unclasped the collar from her neck, and offered a placating smile. "Empress sister, don't be angry. Consider this hell abyss crystal as payment for your trouble." The Asura Empress glanced at the dimly glowing crystal and said in surprise, "You're a man from the Middle Earth, yet you're covered in our Asura clan's treasures." "Fine, my kinner happens to need this. I forgive you." With that, she clutched the hell abyss crystal, beamed with joy, and flashed back into the spatial mirror. Then, with practiced and willing compliance, she bound herself up tightly. Inside the mirror, Tiankin looked bewildered. "Mother, why are you getting happier day by day?" She remembered that when they first arrived, her mother had been too ashamed to face anyone, and had spent all her time pretending to be unconscious. She had no idea when it had happened, but her own mother now seemed to be genuinely taking pleasure in it. The Asura Empress casually tossed the hell abyss crystal to her, and said crossly, "Take it and shut your mouth." Tiankin caught it, examined it, and instantly jumped up in excitement. "Wow, a hell abyss crystal. There are barely any left in the heavenly realm. I never had a chance to use one." "Mother, where did you get it?" The Asura Empress replied, "That brat Fang Chen gave it." Tiankin's face lit up with delight. "Mother, then you must listen to him more and get a few more. That way, my chance at the 5-crown champion will be real." The Asura Empress rolled her eyes at her, silently cursing, asterisk what a filial daughter, asterisk. Meanwhile, in the outside world, the Asura Saint spoke calmly, "Since the chains are secure, we will implant the bloodworm. That way, we can both be at ease." Without a shred of hesitation, and under the Asura Saint's watchful gaze, Fang Chen grabbed the blood, red nail-like worm, and slammed it viciously into his own chest. The Asura Saint's soul sense tracked the bloodworm closely, watching it burrow straight into the 5 deity transformation altars within Fang Chen's abdomen. Only then did he truly relax. A nearly imperceptible, cold smirk tugged at the corner of his lips as he silently laid his schemes. The Asura Saint sneered inwardly, asterisk Fang Chen, "O Fang Chen, you know nothing of the bloodworm's might from the bloodthirsty Asura clan. The moment I activate it, your flesh will be entirely under my control. Then, when I command you to remove the chains, you will obediently comply." Trying to blackmail me with them, how naive, asterisk. He swiftly hid the odd glint in his eyes and urged, "Long nights are fraught with troubled dreams. Let's move quickly." Before the words even faded, he had already cast a teleportation spell and was leading the way. Fang Chen, holding Yue Mingzhu's hand, followed close behind. His sole reason for following the Asura Saint was to prevent this man from obtaining the asterisk hell, suppressing soul, quieting scripture, asterisk. Of course, should they stumble upon any Buddha treasures along the way, he wouldn't mind, holding them in safe keeping on behalf of the Buddhist sect. After all, they were both from the Middle Earth. There was no need to stand on ceremony. Before long, a towering and majestic golden mountain loomed at the western horizon. A boundless, gentle Buddha radiance emanated from it, bathing the whole world in a sheet of gold. This serene and holy atmosphere stood in stark contrast to the hell realm's inherent gloom and oppressiveness. Yet, surrounding that golden mountain, several terrifying auras at the level of giant emperors and Buddha Venerables rolled outward like tsunamis, shattering heaven and earth in chaos wherever they passed. The earth-shattering battle between the ancient giants and the Buddhist monks had already spread in all directions. The Buddha domain centered around the Golden Mountain was now plunged into boundless turmoil. The Asura Saint stood with his hands clasped behind his back and said leisurely, "That is the Buddha's training ground, Westling Mountain. Normally, it is guarded by 18 Buddha Venerables and 1,008 Bodhisattvas, making it virtually unshakable. Now, it is the once, in a millennium opportunity to enter, 18 Buddha Venerables, 1,008 Bodhisattvas." Fang Chen felt his scalp prickle with numbness at the words. The military might of this single Buddha domain surpassed that of the entire Middle Earth combined. And the Hell Realm possessed 9 regions just like this one. In that moment, the Hell Realm's overwhelming power became terrifyingly tangible. But that might actually be a good thing. Once the ceasefire monument was activated later, those freed-up Buddha Venerables would surely besiege the Asura Saint. By then, even if he didn't die, he'd be flayed alive. With that, the Asura saint thrust out his vast sleeve, enveloping the two with the power of a sage. They warped from illusion to reality and shot straight toward Westling Mountain. However, just as they neared the Golden Mountain, a blinding, incandescent Buddha light exploded outward. A colossal Chinese letter character barrier manifested, enveloping all of Westling Mountain and forcibly barring their entry. The Asura saint stumbled, then steadied himself and snorted coldly. I knew Westling Mountain had a mountain protecting Buddhist array. It's a good thing I came prepared. With an upward grasping motion of one hand, a pitch-black, ink-like flag fell into his palm. On its surface, twisted and agonized human faces vividly emerged, crying, wailing, or glaring with utter hatred, as if trapped forever within the flag, unable to be released. Fang Chen's eyes went cold the moment he looked at it. He recognized them. They were the residual souls of the demonic cultivators who had fallen in battle in the Great Desolation Prefecture. The Asura saint had previously gathered all these lingering souls from the Great Desolation battlefield. At the time, Fang Chen hadn't known what his purpose was. Only now did he understand the man had a backup plan if he couldn't get the asterisk hell, suppressing soul, quieting scripture asterisk from him, he would force his way into the hell realm's Westling Mountain. Thus, he had collected these souls early and refined them into this vicious flag, a weapon specifically designed to break Buddhist arrays. Noticing Fang Chen's gaze, the Asura saint smiled dismissively. They're nothing but residual souls lingering in the world. They've even lost the ability to seize a body and rebuild. Rather than let them dissipate in vain, they are better used as nourishment for my wicked soul banner. Step back, don't let it harm you. As his words fell, he violently rubbed his palms together. Countless black wicked souls burst from the flag with ghastly shrieks, pouncing ferociously on the Chinese letter Buddha seal ahead. The seemingly indestructible array, which could easily withstand an Asura emperor, was horrifyingly corroded into a gaping breach by these wicked souls. The Asura saint casually tossed the flag aside and chuckled lightly. Heh, see, problem solved. Fang Chen hastily caught the flag, then raised his hand to the sky, summoning all the scattered residual souls back. He silently channeled the asterisk hell, suppressing soul, quieting scripture asterisk. As the scriptures manifested in the void, every tormented remnant soul was granted liberation. Their resentment was cleansed away, turning them into streaks of translucent figures. They bowed deeply to Fang Chen before vanishing into the space between heaven and earth. At the same time, a single, brilliant feather of merit drifted down and settled gently in Fang Chen's arms. Observing this, the Asura saint merely shook his head, his tone detached. A human life may seem long, but within the river of ages, it is but a tiny splash, gone in an instant. To establish an eternal hegemony and cultivate the grand aspiration of immortality, one must discard all distracting thoughts and forge ahead with singular focus. Kinship, friendship, homeland, they are nothing but fetters on the heart, obstacles on your path. Fang Chen slowly opened his eyes, glanced at him sideways, and said coldly, "Are you lecturing me?" The Asura saint shrugged. "I'm merely stating my own Tao. Any person or thing that hinders my progress will be trampled to dust beneath my feet. Do not interfere with my affairs later." He shot Fang Chen a meaningful look. Then his figure flickered, and he was the first to dart into Westling Mountain. Fang Chen stared coldly at his receding back for a moment, then followed closely, bringing Yimingzhu with him. The instant he stepped into Westling Mountain, the Buddha light, as rich as silk, shone upon him. He felt his mind soften abruptly, his myriad thoughts dissolving in an instant. Past grudges and present aspirations all vanished like smoke in that single moment. Even someone as mighty as the Asura saint couldn't help but press his palms together, feeling an urge to prostrate himself in worship toward that golden mountain. But he was jolted back to his senses a moment later, snorting heavily. The Buddhist sect loves playing these tricks that beguile the mind. He slapped the pouch at his waist. A large pool of swirling, dense demonic liquid flowed out and quickly hardened into 3 pitch-black demonic umbrellas, shielding each of the 3. The all-pervasive influence of the Buddhist essence instantly vanished. The golden mountain, suffused with Buddha light, finally revealed its true form. Fang Chen cast his gaze, and his pupils violently constricted. Because the so-called golden mountain was no mountain at all, it was a colossal corpse, standing 1,000 zhang high, emanating the overwhelming pressure of a sage. Westling Mountain was actually a corpse. Yimingzhu's beautiful eyes quivered as she cried out involuntarily, "This, whose corpse is this? Why does it radiate such a terrifying saint's might?" She attempted to activate the Heavenly Sun's Kai observation art, seeking to peer into the corpse's fortune, but her ocular art could not function at all before the corpse, as if utterly blocked by an invisible and immense force. The Asura Holy Son clasped his hands behind his back, gazing indifferently at the face of the thousand, Zhang giant corpse, and said coldly, who else could it be? Naturally, it is the realm lord of the dark Asura lineage from 10,000 years ago. Had he not perished, how could the Buddha have attained enlightenment?
What?
Fang Chen's heart jolted violently, his mind roaring. The dark Asura realm lord from 10,000 years ago. Fang Chen's gaze abruptly sharpened. 10,000 years ago, the Netherworld realm had lost not just the two realm lords, Huanquan and Tongyuan, but also a third, the realm lord of the dark Asura. Yet, as his thoughts turned, he suddenly realized a problem. After the fall of realm lord Tongyuan, his realm lord qualification was obtained by the other shore, realm lord. Realm lord Huanquan's qualification still exists to this day. Then, whose realm lord qualification did the Buddha inherit? The answer had already stabbed into his mind like an icy iron awl. It could only be that the third realm lord had fallen. Fang Chen's eyes were filled with shock as he stared fixedly at the enormous corpse of the dark Asura, his voice somber. Did the other realm lords join forces to kill him? 10,000 years ago was precisely the juncture when the dark Asura lineage brazenly revolted. That earth-shaking rebellion brought an unprecedented cataclysm upon the entire Netherworld realm. For the realm lord of this lineage to be jointly suppressed by the other realm lords was entirely within reason. The Asura Holy Son first nodded, then slowly shook his head. He was indeed killed. But the one who struck the blow was not the other realm lords. As he spoke, his voice unconsciously lowered, as if brushing a taboo, rather. It was the Tao slave. Fang Chen's brows suddenly furrowed deeply. Tao slave? What in the world is that? But the next moment, a shudder ran through his entire body, and he asked in a trembling voice, could it be? That very taboo which even the saints dread beyond measure. At these words, a deep and irrepressible fear finally surged into the Asura Holy Son's eyes. He nodded gently, his words cold as ice. It is him. A profound, abyssal taboo that exists solely to slay saints. Whenever a saint dares to manifest in the mortal world, the Tao slave shall inevitably hunt them down. Yu Mingzhu could not help but swallow softly, instinctively reaching out to tightly clutch Fang Chen's arm, an uncontrollable shuddering rising from deep within her. She truly could not fathom that a saint was already a creator capable of dominating the world. What kind of existence, then, could specialize in the slaying of saints? Could it be that legendary supreme god? Fang Chen drew in a sharp, cold breath. As he once more beheld that thousand, Zhang corpse which had lain dead for 10 millennia, a suffocating and profound sense of oppression abruptly surged within his heart. What lies at the end of the martial path? A single Tao slave alone is enough to suppress the myriad saints, keeping them from daring to appear in the world. The Asura Holy Son withdrew his gaze, his tone slightly easing, and said, "Such matters are not for us to trouble ourselves with now. Let us first explore this Buddha's dojo." That old bald donkey not only founded his own Buddha domain, but also inherited the legacy of the dark Asura realm lord. The good things he left behind are surely abundant. Upon hearing this, Fang Chen's heart stirred. His gaze, sharp as lightning, swept across the surroundings, and was instantly captivated by the two giant palms of the Asura realm lord. At this moment, the Asura realm lord was still in a seated cross-legged posture, his colossal palms resting before his abdomen, facing skyward. Faintly, it seemed as though something was concealed within those palms. Fang Chen very cautiously teleported to the side of one palm, and then saw clearly that the several dozen Zhang wide interior of the palm had been fashioned into a Dharma hall. At the center of the Dharma hall sat a golden meditation cushion surrounded by 81 white cushions. Judging by the layout, this must have been the very place where the Buddha once preached and expounded the scriptures. On that golden cushion, a faint trace of the Buddha's aura still lingered. But this was not the key point. Fang Chen's pupils abruptly constricted as he stared rigidly beneath the golden cushion. There, a corner of a Buddhist scripture was revealed. His heart suddenly pounded fiercely. It was a scripture used by the Buddha for teaching. Back then, when the Buddha was still a great bodhisattva, the sutra of suppressing hell and pacifying souls he created was sufficient for him to attain supreme Buddhahood. Then wouldn't the Buddhist scriptures he personally created later be even more heaven-defying? An impulse surged, and he subconsciously wanted to rush over in a single step. But upon second thought, he forcefully suppressed that impulse once more. He secretly swept his peripheral vision behind him, and found that the Asura Holy Son was also searching about, with no significant gains for the moment. Yet even as he searched, the Asura Holy Son would occasionally glance at the movements of Fang Chen and Yu Mingju. Fang Chen knew very well that the moment they discovered any paramount treasure, the Asura Holy Son would certainly teleport over at the first opportunity. With the Asura Holy Son's cultivation, how could he possibly out-content him? But if he simply ignored it, later, when the Asura Holy Son found this place himself, this great treasure would likewise fall into his hands. What to do? Suddenly a flash of inspiration struck Fang Chen. Nimbly, he took out the yin-yang fish spatial storage device left by Shu Buxu. He retrieved only the young fish among them. Then, with a single thought, he swept all the cushions on the ground, along with that concealed scripture, into it in one fell swoop. Swish! Almost at the very instant he had just stowed the items away, the Asura Holy Son's figure teleported over. He immediately grabbed Fang Chen's wrist, his gaze keen as a blade. What did you find? Fang Chen curled his lip, putting on a reluctant look. Just some meditation cushions, that's all. The Asura Holy Son narrowed his eyes, smiling yet not. Is that so? How can I not believe it? Without any courtesy, he snatched the young fish storage device and swept it with his divine sense, immediately frowning. It really is just a bunch of broken cushions. How can you treat any piece of trash as treasure? Wait, his voice came to an abrupt halt, and his tone instantly became fervent. There's a scripture. It's the Buddha's Sutra of Departing Heaven and Purifying Tribulations. This is one of the 3 true transmission Buddhist scriptures that uses laws to temper the divine body. In the entire Buddha domain, only 1 person per generation is qualified to cultivate it. And it was just left pressed under the cushion like this. Ha 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 ha. Truly, it could not have been easier to obtain. Clutching the young fish, the Asura Holy Son laughed heartily towards the heavens. When he caught a glimpse of Fang Chen's face, which was as black as the bottom of a pot, he laughed even more smugly. Later, should you encounter any other treasures, I'll help you. You get them, just to settle things between us. I only want this scripture. As for those cushions, you can keep them for yourself. Saying so, with a movement of his mind, he was about to take the scripture away. Fang Chen's face darkened, as if consumed by fury, and he snorted heavily. Since the items are yours, I don't want this spatial storage device anymore either. Having said this, he teleported away in a fit of anger, heading straight for where Yu Mingju was. Watching his departing figure, the Asura Holy Son let out a cold laugh. Heh, brat. Today you finally get a taste of what it feels like to be beaten to the punch, don't you? He smugly weighed the young fish in his hand, the corner of his mouth brimming with undisguised mockery. Fang Chen swiftly arrived at Yu Mingju's side, but he found her squatting before a spirit pond, her 2 pupils shimmering with a brilliant 9-colored radiance. Needless to say, she must have discovered a paramount treasure with exceedingly vigorous fortune. Following her gaze into the pond, Fang Chen discovered that it was full of turtles, large and small. Some were swimming leisurely in the spirit pond, while others were lying on rocks protruding from the water, basking lazily in the sun. Among them, a pure golden turtle that was nibbling on a small fish was especially eye-catching. Fang Chen focused his gaze and was astonished to find that on the golden turtle's back, a Sanskrit character was naturally engraved, faintly exuding a terrifying pressure at the saint level. Yu Mingju, full of curiosity, turned her head and asked him, "What is this? I discovered its fortune is higher than everything else here." Fang Chen was secretly alarmed. Could it be even higher than that sutra of departing heaven and purifying tribulations? He thought for a moment, then released Pingshan Bodhisattva from his pocket. The moment Bodhisattva Pingshan manifested, he instantly sensed the inconceivably dense Buddha power permeating this place, and his shock was profound. Could this be the legendary Western Pure Land of ultimate bliss? Fang Chen shook his head and explained, "This is the Deichang of a Buddha from the Hell Realm." What? Even with his usual unflappable composure, Bodhisattva Pingshan's eyes flew wide with utter astonishment. He hastily brought his palms together, a look of profound reverence on his face, as he silently intoned the Buddha's name. Fang Chen waved dismissively. No rush for the sutras. Quick, look at that golden turtle. Do you know its origins? Bodhisattva Pingshan followed his pointing finger, and his expression underwent another violent shift. He drew a deep breath, and still chanting the Buddha's name under his breath, said, "Amitabha, this is the numinous turtle the Buddha brought with him from the Middle Kingdom all those years ago. It has attended the Buddha's lectures for ages, mastering countless profound Buddhist doctrines. Now its entire body turned to pure gold is a sign that it has achieved the great perfection of the Buddha path." Its current mastery of Buddhism is absolutely not inferior to any contemporary Buddha Venerable. Huh? Doesn't that mean this golden turtle has lived for nearly 10,000 years? Yu Mingju's clever eyes darted about, and she suddenly adopted a tone of deep compassion. This poor little golden turtle, kidnapped and brought to this hell realm since child. D is truly pitiful. No, I must save it and take it back to the Middle Kingdom. So saying, she briskly picked up a spatial storage device, intending to scoop the golden turtle inside. Beside her, Bodhisattva Pingshen's mouth twitched uncontrollably. Spare it, the rescue act. You're clearly just coveting its body. Yu Mingju paid no heed to any of that. Grinning, she beckoned to the golden turtle, her voice sweet and honeyed. Little turtle, come here, I'll take you back to find your mama. Be a good boy and come with me. The golden turtle's emerald eyes rolled around, slanting a sideways glance at Yu Mingju. Then it rolled its eyes upward, giving her a magnificent glare of pure disdain. The message was crystal clear. Do I look like an idiot to you? Yu Mingju was instantly enraged. To be given an eye roll by a little turtle. Her small hand shot out, reaching straight for the golden turtle in an attempt to forcibly grab it. But the turtle's eyes rolled back even harder, and it transformed into a blinding streak of golden light, vanishing instantly. Yu Mingju's grasp closed on nothing but air. She stumbled, nearly tumbling headfirst into the spirit pool. With lightning reflexes, Fang Chen caught her by the waist and advised helplessly, "Don't be too greedy. A numinous turtle from beneath the Buddha's seat isn't so easily caught." Yu Mingju straightened up and clenched her little fists in vexation. "I won't accept this. You go find other treasures. Today, I'm locking horns with this damn turtle." Since cultivating the Heavenly Sun Kai observation art, everything had gone smoothly for her. She had never once suffered a setback. Could she really be defeated today by a turtle? Immediately, she activated her 9 colored pupils to full power, meticulously searching for the golden turtle's whereabouts. Fang Chen didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he knew time was truly of the essence. The non-aggression stele would take effect soon. He had to seize the moment to see if there were any other paramount Buddhist treasures here. Just then, a splash of vivid crimson, violently clashing with the solemn hues of the Buddhist setting, fiercely seized his attention. He turned his gaze and saw that it was a medicinal garden. Inside, it was filled with flowers blooming in an eerily peculiar red. Their slender red stamens, like thousands of strands of scarlet silk thread, swayed gently in the breeze. Seen from afar, they resembled bewitching dancers clad in crimson gowns. "What is this?" Fang Chen drew closer, studying them with immense curiosity. Bodhisattva Pingshen's gaze, however, shook violently once more. He hastily warned, his tone urgent, "Don't get too close. That's the Oblivion Flower." Legend says the Meng Po soup of the Netherworld's court is brewed from this very flower. If you inhale too much pollen, you will utterly lose all memories of this life. A chill ran through Fang Chen's heart, and he immediately stepped back. But then a second thought struck. He was not terrified of losing his memories at all, so what was there to fear? He halted, stroked his chin, and his gaze returned to those enchantingly red blossoms. How effective is this thing against cultivators of our deity transformation stage? Bodhisattva Pingshen remained far away, not daring to approach a single step, and said grimly, "This substance affects even the sages, let alone deity transformation cultivators." Pausing, he added with utmost gravity, "It is said that these flowers were formed from the holy blood of the first generation, Asura realm, lord of the Oblivion god, Asura tribe, Kant." Aining his heaven, piercing innate divine ability, Fang Chen's heart jolted. Only then did a sudden understanding dawn. No wonder this blood possessed such divine potency. His thoughts racing, he immediately leaped into the garden and waved his hand, uprooting several plants, soil and all, and carefully transplanted them into the breath soil. He calculated that someday when free, he could use these to brew a few vats of Meng Po soup. Last time he'd ransacked Wang Qingxiao, he had been far too ruthless. The resentment was almost thick enough to pierce the heavens. He desperately needed the Meng Po soup to properly quell that hatred. He brushed the soil from his palms and began surveying his surroundings, his sharp eyes scanning for anything of value. But in that single sweep, he was suddenly jolted by the realization that the Asura Holy Son had vanished without a trace at some unknown moment. Even when the golden turtle of the Buddha path had appeared, the Holy Son hadn't moved to seize it. Fang Chen immediately held his breath, concentrated his spirit, and swept the area with his divine sense. Indeed, he detected not a single trace of the Asura Holy Son's aura. Fortunately, the Holy Son carried a young fish within him, Fang Chen instantly shut his eyes and probed meticulously via the young fish. In the next instant, his gaze shot out like a bolt of cold lightning, directly at the forehead of the Realm Lord's corpse. The Asura Holy Son was hiding right there. His figure flickered, and he instantly flashed over to the colossal forehead. Up close, he saw that on that massive forehead, like a towering wall, a golden, glowing cave mouth gaped open. The cave's inner walls were unnaturally smooth, as if pierced through in a single strike by some gargantuan, pillar-like Dharma artifact. This, very likely, was the fatal wound that killed the Dark Asura Realm Lord. And this ghastly wound had now been converted by some Buddha into a meditation chamber. Faint golden light permeated the chamber. The walls on both sides were meticulously carved with rows of imposing and solemn Buddha niches. The Asura Holy Son stood before a standing mirror, completely motionless, as if struck by an immobilizing spell. Fang Chen's heart leaped. He rushed inside, his eyes darting left and right. The chamber was arranged with extreme simplicity. Only that ancient mirror hung on the wall, while on the floor lay a yellowed rush mat. Upon the mat were neatly placed a palm-sized incense burner, a string of prayer beads redolent with ancient charm, and a weighty Buddhist alms bowl. Within the alms bowl, one could vaguely make out some mysterious liquid emitting a faint golden sheen. Fang Chen's breathing suddenly quickened. Seizing the unparalleled opportunity, while the Asura Holy Son was immobilized, he grabbed the alms bowl with a death grip and flung it violently into his spatial storage treasure. Immediately after, he snatched up the string of Buddhist prayer beads with lightning speed. At this moment, he only cursed his parents for not giving him a few more hands. He was desperate to sweep everything in sight clean. Just then, the Asura Holy Son seemed to sense the commotion outside. His body swayed violently, and he forcefully broke free from the immobilizing trance, roaring in fury, "Stop!" Even as he spoke, he grabbed the mirror and stuffed it into the young fish in his palm. At the same time, he made a grasping motion through the air and pulled the incense burner tightly into his grip. Fang Chen's grab for the incense burner closed on empty air, but his reaction was equally swift. He didn't even leave the rush mat, yanking it up and storing it away. You, the Asura Holy Son, glared venomously at Fang Chen, the killing intent in his eyes leaping like fierce flames. He had been the first to discover this place, only for that bastard Fang Chen to swoop in and reap an astronomical bargain. Over half of the Buddha's personally used relics had been snatched away by Fang Chen. However, the next thought that his bloodworms were still inside Fang Chen's body, and that once he asserted control, all those treasures would have to be obediently coughed up, calmed him. At this thought, the killing intent in his eyes receded like a tide. Instead, he forced a smile onto his face and said, "You arrived rather quickly." As he spoke, he discreetly placed the incense burner in his hand into the young fish. The reason he put the treasure into the young fish instead of his own storage space was that he harbored a deeply malicious ulterior motive. In case the people from the Buddha realm came after him, he could simply deny everything and claim that Fang Chen had stolen everything. After all, that young fish belonged to Fang Chen. Fang Chen asked, full of curiosity, "Why did you just stand motionless in front of the mirror?" Asura Holy Son replied calmly, "This is the robe and crown mirror left by the Buddha, said to reveal a person's future." He paused, a faint, barely perceptible shadow flickering in his eyes, and said, "I saw my future self." As for the specific details, he did not elaborate, because the future he saw was extremely unfavorable to him. In that vision, his cultivation had reached a terrifying level, surpassing even the Saint Realm, every move shaking the myriad worlds and heavens, making him the undisputed overlord of his era. Yet he was being madly hunted down. And that pursuer... As he spoke, his eyes narrowed as he looked at Fang Chen. That pursuer's figure was vastly different from Fang Chen's, but for some reason he faintly sensed an inexplicable overlap between Fang Chen and that silhouette. A chill aura of killing intent stirred silently in his heart. The list of reasons he had compiled for why this brat cannot be left alive just grew by one. Upon hearing this, Fang Chen's heart blazed with eagerness, and he hastily asked, "Can I take a look too?" He desperately wanted to know exactly what the detailed vision of his future that Tianji Elder once divined for him looked like. At whose hand did he truly meet his end? If he could know in advance, perhaps he could defy fate and change his destiny, finding a way to avoid it. Asura Holy Son said leisurely, "This mirror can be used 2 more times. If you want to use it, of course you can trade me the Buddhist beads and the alms bowl." Fang Chen immediately put on an expression of pained reluctance, waving his hands repeatedly. "Forget it. Too expensive. I don't want it." Asura Holy Son shrugged indifferently. "Suit yourself." He then surveyed the surrounding walls and muttered to himself, to blow through the skull of a Saint Realm expert with a single strike. Just how did that Tao slave manage it? He shook his head in bewilderment. A Saint Realm body has long been cultivated to the point of agelessness. By all logic, it should be impossible to injure so easily. A thought struck Fang Chen, and with a sharp shing, he drew his purple sword and forcefully slashed at the wall. This is a genuine Asura Saint corpse. If he could extract a few drops of Saint blood, wouldn't that be enough for Lu Zhu to easily break through to the Asura Emperor realm? Who would have thought that the purple sword, which normally cut through anything, now only produced a long trail of sparks on the wall, leaving behind a faint white scratch? Asura Holy Son sneered contemptuously. Stop daydreaming. If the saint blood of the dark Asura realm lord were so easily obtained, do you think it would be your turn? He glanced mockingly at Fang Chen. It's long been scraped clean by those from the Buddha realm. Put away that sword of yours quickly, lest you dull its edge. Fang Chen felt utterly unwilling. A mountain of treasure lay before his eyes, but he couldn't take it away. Truly the height of frustration. Suddenly, an idea flashed in his mind, and he flipped his hand to produce the angel blade. Ordinary divine weapons were useless against an Asura saint corpse. But what about the angel blade, specifically designed to counter the Asura race? He gripped the angel blade tightly, clenched his teeth, and stabbed down with all his might. A dull thump echoed, and the supposedly indestructible skull of the Asura saint corpse was actually pierced an inch deep by the angel blade. This sight caused even Asura Holy Son's expression to change drastically. You actually have an angel blade. He quickly focused his gaze and saw a thick, pitch-black, viscous blood slowly oozing from the wound. That black blood emanated a horrifying dark aura that made one's very soul shudder. With just a single glance, Asura Holy Son felt as if his soul had been doused in a corrosive poison that melted flesh and bone, the pain unbearable. Ah, he let out an involuntary cry of agony, his body instantly shifting from solid to ethereal as he fled outward in extreme terror, shouting repeatedly, "That corpse has been contaminated by the Tao slave's power. Run." Fang Chen also felt his soul being violently corroded at the same time, a pain that pierced to the marrow and was nearly unbearable. Fortunately, at the critical moment, the familiar rustling of the primordial void ancient tree resounded from the depths of his mind, and an indescribable coolness surged through his entire body, dispelling all the horrific corrosive intent. A look of shock and suspicion appeared on his face. No wonder the people from the Buddha realm hadn't set their sights on this Asura saint blood. It turned out the blood was already so terribly contaminated. This was foul blood that could poison a sage to death on the spot. He decisively pulled out the angel blade and prepared to flee. But before leaving, seeing the oozing trickle of black blood, he, emboldened by the primordial void ancient tree's backing, took out a jade bottle with reckless audacity and held it to the wound. 1 drop, 2 drops, 3 drops. 4 drops, 5 drops, 6 drops. The rustling of the primordial void ancient tree in his mind grew more and more urgent, frantically warning him of an immense danger closing in. After collecting a full 10 drops, he decisively snapped the lid shut, then with hands flying, affixed sealing talismans before flashing out in a mad dash. The moment he left that meditation chamber, the searing pain in his soul rapidly receded like a retreating tide. Fang Chen couldn't help but exhale a long breath. A cold wind blew by, and he then realized his back was already drenched in cold sweat. In the short span of merely 10 breaths, he had already wandered back and forth before the gates of death several times. Asura Holy Son clutched his still agonizing head, looking at him with concern. Your soul isn't damaged, is it? If Fang Chen were to forget the memories of the scripture of suppressing hell and calming souls, then this whole play would be impossible to continue. Fang Chen's face was as pale as paper. He managed to shake his head and said, "It's fine." Asura Holy Son looked Fang Chen up and down with uncertain surprise. It seems you have a powerful soul-protecting treasure on you, to have stayed inside for so long and still be unharmed. He glanced at the wisps of black mist gradually seeping out of the meditation chamber and shuddered with lingering fear. If he had stayed just a few breaths longer, he probably would have died inside. The lingering might from a single strike of the Tao slave had contaminated a saint's blood to such terrifying, venomous depths. It was almost impossible to imagine the whirl-shattering scene of the Tao slave's full-force attack. Merely thinking about it made one shiver uncontrollably. Asura Holy Son shook his head, forcibly dispelling his fear, and said solemnly, "The tainted blood has begun to spread. We cannot stay here any longer. We must quickly find the scripture of suppressing hell and calming souls, and leave immediately." Fang Chen nodded, but his heart grew secretly vigilant. Could it be that activating the Truce Stele required some time? Why was there still no sign of it? If Asura Holy Son truly found the scripture of suppressing hell and calming souls, he would definitely turn hostile on the spot. He would kill him, and he certainly wouldn't spare Yu Mingzhu and Pingshan Bodhisattva. Every single one of the Central Plains experts in his pocket would be brutally slaughtered by him. At that moment, a heaven-shaking, earth-shattering boom resounded. The impenetrable Supreme Buddha array on Western Spirit Mountain suddenly erupted with an earth-shattering roar. Both were shocked and looked up. The moment they saw the sight, their expressions changed dramatically. It was a powerful Asura clad in a blood, red Kaseya crashing heavily onto the Buddha array from high above. Behind him, a grand temple faintly shimmered, countless Buddha statues within chanting solemn sutras. This was clearly an immensely accomplished Buddha Venerable. But what made their pupils constrict even more sharply was that a thick, vicious crimson spear had impaled him through and through, nailing him dead onto the Buddha array. It was a giant sovereign of immense power, striking through the void to deliver a thunderous kill. But where was that giant sovereign? Why had he vanished without a trace? After all, his body was at least a few dozen zhang tall, something that should have been visible at a single glance. Fang Chen immediately sensed something amiss. His form flickered, and he teleported to Yu Mingzhu's side. At that moment, Yu Mingzhu was still chasing that little golden turtle. Suddenly being grabbed by the shoulder by Fang Chen, she was slightly startled. "What's wrong? Imamem." Before she could finish, Fang Chen reached out and covered her little mouth. Immediately afterward, Fang Chen's gaze suddenly met hers. Fang Chen's telepathic voice immediately sounded in her mind. "Don't speak, a giant emperor is coming."
What?
Yu Mingzhu's pupils shrank sharply. She immediately activated the Heavenly Sun Kai observation art and scanned the surroundings. Suddenly, her pupils contracted drastically, because she discovered that right beside the Asura Holy Son, there was a massive shadow of ink, Black Fate energy. This meant that an extremely ominous entity had appeared next to the Asura Holy Son. Although the Asura Holy Son couldn't see the giant emperor, his powerful perception as Asura Emperor still sensed the approach of danger. In the blink of an eye, his human disguise suddenly burst apart, revealing his true form, a blood, red Shura clan body over 2 men tall. A jet, black long spear as sharp as ink was tightly gripped in his hand, and he swept it in a full circle around him. The sky was forcibly cleaved apart, revealing long rifts of nothingness. This single strike directly shattered the world barrier. But as the spear swept toward the area behind the Asura Holy Son, a crisp crack rang out, as if it had struck something hard, and it could no longer cut through the void. At the same time, the space where the spear was embedded trembled violently. A colossal, golden figure, previously invisible, materialized. The figure stood 40 zhang tall, like a towering mountain. On its forehead blazed 2 brilliant golden suns, radiating dazzling light. It was exactly an invisible two-sun giant emperor.
What?
The Asura Holy Son's face changed drastically. Without even thinking about his spear, his body directly shifted from solid to void, trying to dart away. But it was still a step too late. The giant emperor swung a palm strike, and the Asura Holy Son's phasing figure was forcibly yanked out from the gap in the Buddhist formation. He decisively abandoned Fang Chen and the others, immediately trying to flee for his life. A muffled bang resounded as the Asura Holy Son was heavily smashed against the World Lord's corpse. The formidable Asura Emperor body was cracked open, his internal organs spilling out through the fractures. With just one blow, the Asura Holy Son was gravely wounded. This was the might of the two-sun giant emperor. "Heh, I noticed you long ago." The two-sun giant emperor's massive vertical eye stared down at them coldly, cruelty and mockery in his gaze. "Our 8th army has its sights set on this Buddhist dojo, and you eat to snatch it, hand over the items, and I'll grant you a swift death. Otherwise, the methods of us giants are not something you wish to experience." His voice carried immense pressure. While the Asura Holy Son fared slightly better, Fang Chen, Yu Mingzhu, and the Pingshan Bodhisattva all trembled, an irrepressible fear welling up from the depths of their hearts. Even Fang Chen was facing a two-sun giant emperor directly for the first time. A sense of insignificance, like a tiny boat on a vast ocean, instantly flooded his heart. This kind of existence, to kill them, would be as easy as crushing a swarm of ants without any effort at all. "What? Do you want me to use force?" The two-sun giant emperor narrowed his eyes, raised his hand and grabbed. The blood, red long spear flew instantly into his grasp. A primordial aura swept out in all directions. Yu Mingju's internal organs shuddered violently, and trickles of blood began to flow. Fang Chen's heart clenched tightly at the sight. If the two Sun Giant Emperor's aura continued to be released, even without lifting a finger, Yu Mingju would die from being unable to bear it. How could they deal with him? Suddenly, Fang Chen's peripheral vision caught the meditation chamber above the forehead, and he recalled the scene where the Asura Holy Son had been entranced by a mirror earlier. At this moment, the Asura Holy Son's gaze also seemed to think of that mirror. He narrowed his eyes, pondering its feasibility. Just then, he sensed Fang Chen looking at him, and their gazes met. After a brief clash of glances, they seemed to understand each other's thoughts, each raising an eyebrow. The Asura Holy Son withdrew his gaze, coughed up a mouthful of blood, and raised his hand. "Don't attack, I'll hand it over." Trembling, he took out an ancient mirror and said, "This is the Buddha's dressing mirror. It contains a projection of the Buddha. I haven't had time to study its specific uses. Just promise me a quick death later." Weakly, he tossed the dressing mirror over. The two Sun Giant Emperor extended his index finger, caught the dressing mirror, and his expression showed interest. "Oh, the Buddha's dressing mirror." He brought the mirror to his face and looked into it. Instantly, his entire being froze in place.
Now,
The Asura Holy Son let out a loud shout, and with his severely injured body teleported over. His palm grabbed, and the long spear was in hand. He poured all his remaining strength into the spear shaft, and fiercely stabbed at the Giant Emperor's enormous eye. Fang Chen also acted decisively at this moment. He teleported atop the Giant Emperor's head, gripped the angel's blade with both hands, and viciously stabbed at his crown. When these two struck, they held nothing back. Their moves were one more ruthless than the other, all aimed at taking the Giant Emperor's life.
but,
At that moment, from Fang Chen's high vantage point, he suddenly noticed the corner of the Giant Emperor's mouth twitch upward almost imperceptibly. His heart shook violently, and he immediately roared, "Retreat!" As he shouted, he himself had already teleported away. The Asura Holy Son's expression also changed drastically, and his body immediately phased into the void. Two thunderous booms bang and crack resounded. Just as they retreated, the Giant Emperor's two massive palms teleported and slammed into the space above his head and directly in front of him. The terrifying shockwave sent Fang Chen, who was mid-teleport, crashing heavily toward the World Lord's corpse. Fang Chen did not have a body as powerful as the Asura Holy Son. With this impact, he would surely explode like a watermelon, his soul and body extinguished on the spot. At this critical moment, Yu Mingju's eyes swirled with nine, colored light frantically, and she raised her hand and slashed at her own crown.
go,
She severed all the fortune energy she had accumulated thus far and transferred it to Fang Chen. Almost at the instant the fortune energy transferred, the little golden turtle hiding in the texture of the World Lord's thigh curiously poked its head out. It wouldn't have mattered if it hadn't, but the moment it stuck its head out, its vision went black as Fang Chen smashed directly onto its turtle head. Immediately, Sanskrit characters densely covered the little golden turtle's body, forming an incredibly powerful barrier that completely neutralized the impact force on Fang Chen. With a thud, Fang Chen safely tumbled down, unharmed. He was completely dumbfounded. He had already released his domain, prepared to use it to restore his body when he was crushed to pieces, yet in the end, nothing happened. But the Asura Holy Son was not so lucky. Along with another loud bang, he was also struck by the palm's shockwave. His body blew backward like a falling leaf and slammed heavily against the Buddhist formation, creating a web of fine cracks. PFFD. The Asura Holy Son's already mangled body now resembled a tattered rag doll, incomplete and broken. The two Sun Giant Emperor's eyes gleamed with mockery. Such petty tricks, you think you can fool this emperor? Since it's a Buddha's relic, how could I dare to try it so easily? As it turned out, he hadn't looked at the mirror at all. He was merely testing the two. And sure enough, there was indeed a trap. The two Sun Giant Emperor's gaze gradually turned icy cold. Two stinking insects still want to toy with this emperor. Truly courting death, I'll slaughter you all and search at my leisure. He raised his long spear, locking firmly onto Fang Chen. You stinking insect are the most cunning, so I'll kill you first. Fang Chen's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly said, "Hold on, I'll take you to a Buddha's meditation chamber. All his treasures are inside." Buddha's meditation chamber. The two Sun Giant Emperor's eyes lit up, and the momentum of the blood, red spear in his hand slowed, lead the way. Fang Chen immediately scrambled to his feet, leaped up, and flew toward the World Lord's forehead. The two Sun Giant Emperor closely followed, and a golden glowing cave entrance came into view. The opening was not much smaller than his own body. He could enter by stooping slightly. But the two, Sun Giant Emperor, suddenly noticed a wisp of black mist emanating a dangerous aura seeping out. His gaze instantly turned utterly cold. You intend to lead me into danger. Fang Chen shook his head and said that black mist only looks dangerous. It doesn't pose much threat to the body. With that, he offered no further explanation and walked straight into the cave. The black mist immediately surged up, enveloping Fang Chen. A sharp pain originating from his soul struck instantly. Fortunately, the grand void ancient tree intervened again. A rustling sound dispelled the black mist that had entered his body, and a cooling sensation alleviated his agony. However, as time passed, the pain only intensified. Fang Chen endured the excruciating pain with a calm expression, and said, "This is the corpse of a realm lord." The Buddha hollowed out its head to create a meditation chamber. Many of the Buddha's and realm lord's greatest treasures are beyond our ability to take. Is that so? The two, Sun Giant Emperor, narrowed his eyes, scrutinizing Fang Chen's expression, not believing him at all. Fang Chen said no more, and strode into the deepest part of the cave. The foul blood here had already pooled into a lake, flowing thickly across the ground. Even without making contact, the soul-piercing agony already had his entire body tensed. The muscles at the corner of his mouth twitched uncontrollably, a sign that the pain he endured inside was nearing its limit. Fang Chen clenched his teeth tightly, and with a sudden thought, he acted. An ancient bronze palace exuding a desolate aura was boldly brought forth by him, heavily suppressing the far end of the meditation chamber. In an instant, the realm lord aura emanating from the bronze palace roared out of the cave like a raging tide. Outside the cave, the two, Sun Giant Emperor, who had still harbored some doubt, paled dramatically. He cried out involuntarily, This is the aura of a female realm lord. Brat, take it out, quickly." Fang Chen endured the heart-wrenching agony, struggling to keep his voice steady as he replied, "This is a bronze palace, heavy as Mount Tai. Moreover, it cannot be stored in any spatial container, so I cannot move it." Bronze palace, the two, Sun Giant Emperor's pupils contracted sharply, and he blurted out, "That is the mobile palace of the underworld realm lord. It is a treasure forged from mysterious bronze, rumored to be immovable even by the Nine, Sun Asura Emperor himself." At that moment, the two, Sun Giant Emperor, could no longer restrain his greed. His heart was thoroughly tempted. He couldn't help but wonder, if he could open this bronze palace, what earth-shattering treasures must be hidden within. But then a sliver of doubt crept in. Could this be a trap? Yet he quickly reasoned, if Fang Chen, a mere divine transformation human, could enter and exit unscathed, why couldn't he, the mighty Giant Emperor? With that thought, he immediately bent down and squeezed into the cave. At first, everything seemed normal, but when his massive body was halfway through, an abrupt change occurred. A dense cloud of black mist rushed toward him, and instantly a soul, rending agony, erupted from the depths of his being. A blood-curdling scream suddenly echoed from deep within the cave.
Wow.
Even as mighty as the Giant Emperor was, he now let out a howl of agony. Roaring, "You dare deceive me," he frantically struggled to retreat. At this point, the pain Fang Chen endured had also reached its limit. His neck flushed crimson, veins bulging, he let out a bone-chilling roar. "Asura Saint Son, if you're still alive, strike now." Not far away, the Asura Saint Son, his body already battered beyond recognition, grit his teeth fiercely upon hearing this. He swiftly retrieved a suit of blood-red armor, hastily donned it, and then in a flash of teleportation, directly sealed the cave entrance, bracing the opening with his own body. This blood-red armor was left to him by his mother, Dongfang Canyu. Back then, she had relied on this very armor to dominate all foes, blocking countless lethal assaults from powerful adversaries. Though the armor was now damaged, its power remained formidable. His earlier triumph over the Calamity, transcending Black Lotus, had also been thanks to this armor. The Asura Saint Son gripped a long spear, its tip braced fiercely behind him, completely cutting off the two, Sun Giant Emperor's escape with his body. "Get out of the way!" The two, Sun Giant Emperor, howled in pain, twisting around to deliver a vicious kick straight at the Asura Saint Son. A terrifying crash echoed. The horrifying force nearly shattered the Asura Saint Son's body. Thankfully, the blood-red armor activated once more, absorbing the brunt of the impact for him. Leaning on the spear for support, he barely managed to hold his ground, avoiding being sent flying by the kick. Move now, the two, Sun Giant Emperor was utterly enraged, mustering all his strength to deliver a second kick. But at this critical moment, a sudden anomaly erupted from deep within the meditation chamber. A great wave of black foul blood came sweeping forth like a howling tide. It was Fang Chen who had used spatial force to hurl all the foul blood covering the chamber floor. At the sight, the two Sun Giant Emperor's expression drastically changed. The mere black mist had already corroded his soul beyond endurance. How much worse would the actual foul blood be? If it struck him head on, death was certain. Fortunately, though his body was wedged in the cave, he was not without combat prowess. He opened his mouth and bellowed, unleashing an invisible force meant to blast the oncoming wave of foul blood back. However, before he could act, a roar of unbearable agony erupted from the depths of the chamber. Karmic Charm, activate! This was the very karmic charm he had requested from the Other Shore Realm Lord when he first summoned her avatar. This technique was only effective against one Calamity Realm sages, meaning those below the three Sun Giant Emperor, and was strictly forbidden from being used on the Asura race. Fang Chen had thought he would only have the chance to use it in the heavenly realm, never expecting it to come into play here. The power of the karmic charm instantly activated, directly sweeping over the two Sun Giant Emperor. Sensing danger, he frantically unleashed his own curse power, attempting to repel the invasive karmic force. But it was too late. Most of the karmic force had already taken effect, causing him to alternate between lucidity and a dazed stupor. The two Sun Giant Emperor's eyes held a mix of clarity and confusion as he muttered to himself, "Beauty, I love you. No, I love you so much." Then he suddenly pleaded in panic, "Wait, I don't want the treasure. Stop, I don't want it anymore." Fang Chen shouted furiously, "Now you say you don't want it. Open wide and swallow it all." At the command, the two Sun Giant Emperor involuntarily opened his huge bloody maw. His eyeballs quivered violently as he watched in despair as the black foul blood flew directly into his mouth, sliding down his throat into his stomach. In an instant, his soul immediately began to corrode and putrefy. An unimaginable, supreme agony actually broke him free from the karmic charm's control, and he howled in madness. "Ah, kill me now." He thrashed furiously, his massive body sending the Asura Saint Sun behind him flying, then he too tumbled out of the cave, crashing heavily to the ground. His 40-yang colossal form rolled and writhed on the ground, shattering the void inch by inch, unleashing patches of nothingness. The heaven, pacifying Bodhisattva hurriedly shielded Yu Mingzhu and fled clumsily to the back of the realm Lord's corpse. Wave after wave of terrifying shockwaves, laced with curse power, tore through the void, permeating every corner of the Four Spirits Mountain. Only the small area behind the realm Lord's corpse remained safe. When the giant emperor's corpse finally ceased its struggles, the lingering destructive forces gradually dissipated. Yu Mingzhu cautiously poked her head out and immediately drew a sharp breath. She saw that the giant emperor, in his agony, had actually torn off his own head, committing suicide. It was unimaginable what degree of torment he had endured. "Oh no, Fang Chen!" Yu Mingzhu's heart clenched, and she immediately soared into the air, streaking toward the meditation chamber like a beam of light. She had just reached the entrance when she saw Fang Chen staggering out from within. His face was as pale as paper, clearly indicating severe damage to his soul. A faint layer of black mist clung to him. Husband Yu Mingzhu, frantic with worry, rushed to embrace him. Fang Chen hastily raised a hand against the wall and said urgently, Don't come closer, it will infect you." I'll be fine in a moment." Many traces of foul blood still stained him. They must not be touched. But Yu Mingzhu paid no heed and still rushed forward. Before she could get close to Fang Chen, a sharp pain assaulted her soul as if stung by 100 bees at once. The agony sent her staggering to the ground, clutching her head and wailing without end. She dared not imagine that merely sensing it through space could inflict such excruciating pain. Then what kind of horrific torment must Fang Chen himself be enduring, drenched in that foul blood? Bracing against the piercing agony, she tore 2 tufts of fur from the large white rabbit in her arms, tossing one to Fang Chen and clutching the other tightly. Fang Chen pressed the fur against his head, and only then did the unbearable pain begin to slowly ease. Yu Mingzhu gradually recovered as well. She staggered to her feet, only to find herself drenched in sweat, her face frighteningly pale. No wonder that too, Sun Giant Emperor would rather kill himself than endure the pain. The damage this foul blood inflicts on the soul is truly immense. Her voice weak, she asked, "Husband, are you all right?" Fang Chen shuddered violently, blasting away his blood-stained clothes, then stepped forward and pulled Yu Mingzhu tightly into his embrace. With a mixture of heartache and reproach, he said, "Don't be so foolish again." Tears welled in her eyes, and she choked out, "I don't want to be foolish, but even more, I don't want to lose you." Fang Chen silently held her tighter, his fists secretly clenching behind her back. He dared not imagine how devastated Yu Mingzhu would be if the day truly came when he perished in his tribulation. Could it be that this fate is truly unalterable? If the cultivation of divine transformation is insufficient, then what of becoming a sage? If even a sage cannot, then what about transcending mortality and entering sainthood? For the first time in his life, a fierce, overwhelming desire arose within him, to struggle against this seemingly irreversible destiny. He held her deeply for a while, when suddenly a commotion came from the earth. Fang Chen snapped back to alertness, a cold glint flashing in his eyes. Releasing her, he said, "Let's go, quickly check on that Asura Holy Son." At this moment, a trace of killing intent was spreading in his gaze. The Asura Holy Son is surely badly wounded as well. If we can seize this chance to kill him now, that would be perfect. The two flew back to the ground, finding the Asura Holy Son tilting his head back and drinking a bottle of blood, red spirit liquid. His shattered body actually began to recover, at a speed visible to the naked eye. Fang Chen inwardly sighed in regret. He had missed the best chance to kill him.
Hua?
The Asura Holy Son let out a long breath of turbid air and sighed. "I nearly met my end just now." He removed the red armor from his body and, with extreme care, stored it away. Gazing at the colossal corpse of the giant emperor before him, he turned his head to look at Fang Chen, a deep wariness flickering in the depths of his eyes. Had he not witnessed it with his own eyes, he would never have believed that a human divine transformation cultivator at the two declines of heaven, man stage, could actually slay a peak status sun giant emperor. If this young man could be used by him, it would be like adding wings to a tiger. But if he were an enemy, he would inevitably become a deadly threat in the future. Thinking of this, he shook his head, and with hands clasped behind his back, sighed, a pity. The enmity between us runs too deep. Otherwise, the two of us might have tried becoming friends on this martial path. Hearing this, Fang Chen also felt a secret pang of emotion. He had never imagined that there would come a day when he would fight side by side with the Asura Holy Son. Moreover, their coordination had been exceptionally seamless. A mere exchange of glances was enough to understand each other's thoughts. The last person with whom he had such tacit understanding was Hong Xiu. Yet of these two, one was separated by race and drifted further away. The other was a mortal enemy, destined for a fight to the death. Truly, fate plays cruel tricks. Fang Chen chuckled lightly and shook his head. Forget it. Being your friend means being turned into a pawn at any moment. Too exhausting. The Asura Holy Son shrugged. Perhaps enough. Quickly help me find the hell, suppressing soul, quelling scripture. The ancient giants are winning one victory after another. A new giant emperor will arrive soon. His gaze swept the surroundings again, carefully searching for any suspicious place to hide scriptures. Suddenly, his eyes froze. Between the legs of that realm, Lord Giant statue, a dark, unhealed spatial rift had been blasted open. This must have been inadvertently blasted open by the giant emperor during his death throes. Independent space. Without hesitation, he flashed inside. Fang Chen's expression shifted slightly, and he flew in closely behind. When his vision cleared, his heart sank slightly. Within the independent space, rows of ancient, weathered bookshelves stood. They were filled with all manner of ancient Buddhist scriptures from the Buddha realm. What made his pupils sharply contract were the several scrolls of scripture, heavy with overwhelming pressure, floating above the Buddha statue deepest within. Among them, one was completely pitch black. It was unmistakably the true copy of the health-suppressing soul, quelling scripture. And the Asura Holy Son had already flashed before the statue, his hand trembling as he seized it. A suppressed yet fervent chuckle escaped his throat. He, ha 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 ha, the hell-suppressing soul, quelling scripture. I have it at last, at last. The path of the Buddha, he walked it, and I, the Asura Holy Son, can walk it too. Fang Chen's expression changed drastically. Without a moment's hesitation, he withdrew rapidly, decisively retreating from the independent space. He flashed to Yu Mingzhu, seized her shoulder, and urgently shouted, "Ping Tian, go now." Now that the Asura Holy Son had obtained the scripture, Fang Chen held no further use to this fiend. What would happen next was almost self-evident. The Asura Holy Son was about to turn on him. Leave a champh. Grasping the black scripture scroll, the Asura Holy Son strode out of the independent space. With a casual wave of his hand, a curtain of scarlet blood energy instantly coalesced into a barrier, firmly blocking the gap in the Buddha array. Fang Chen's path of escape was completely sealed. Fang Chen turned around, narrowed his eyes, and said with a faint, mocking smile, "Our little boat of friendship seems to capsize rather easily." The Asura Holy Son chuckled. "Be my brother in the next life. In this one, I only want you to become a ghost." The words were still on his lips when a murderous light exploded in his eyes. His divine sense violently stirred the bloodworms inside Fang Chen's body. However, at the very instant he was about to detonate them, the golden sky of the Buddha realm suddenly trembled violently like a water surface, ripples spreading endlessly. Billowing black clouds like monstrous waves swept in from the horizon. The Buddha lords and giant emperors locked in life or death combat, along with monks and ancient giants, all seemed to sense something simultaneously and halted in terror. Soon, the people within the Buddha array also felt a suffocating palpitation wash over them. An oppressive pressure flowed through the air, making spines shiver and fingers too afraid to move. No one could tell what it was, but it was enough to make all living beings tremble on instinct. Even a powerhouse like the Shura Emperor wore a grave expression, not daring to breathe loudly as he stared at the horizon. The vast Buddha realm, moments ago filled with earth-shaking battle cries, instantly plunged into deathly silence. Only pairs of horrified eyes, unblinking amidst the flickering firelight, awaited the coming of the unknown. Finally, the black clouds pressed down and swept overhead. The sky was compressed into boiling waves, surging rapidly toward the distance. And behind them, a majestic, boundless voice like that of a Brahma god suddenly exploded. That voice lingered without end, suppressing the skies above the Buddha realm, overlapping and echoing as if from afar yet right beside the ear, thundering with fury, "Begone." The overlapping echoes, when heard by ordinary beings, caused inexplicable panic, like facing the life or death heavenly tribulation alone while undergoing nascent soul tribulation. The overwhelming might of heaven, unstoppable. But upon falling into the ears of those ancient giants, it was as if divine thunder from the ninth heaven directly exploded deep within their souls. Ordinary ancient giants were shaken on the spot, vomiting blood and stumbling to their knees. Even the mighty giant kings trembled all over, the star charts on their foreheads suddenly thrown into chaos, flickering erratically. Even the curse sun wheels of those giant emperors flickered and spun out of control at this moment. The Truce Stele, it's the Truce Stele. How can there be a Truce Stele in the Hell Realm? A giant emperor cried out in disbelief. Another giant emperor turned and fled, roaring in terror, "Go, leave the Hell Realm quickly. If we violate that person's rules, he will descend personally." From the giant emperors down to the common ancient giants, all fighting spirit vanished. They immediately abandoned the battlefield and scrambled to flee toward the sky, reaching dark pillars. The eminent monks of the Buddha realm were stunned at first, then burst into ecstatic cheers. As the terrifying heavenly voice faded into the distance, the Buddha realm, which had been on the verge of falling, was instantly saved. The Asura Holy Son broke free from the immense pressure, his eyes turning sharp as blades as they shot toward Fang Chen. "You activated the Truce Stele. Idiot, this will bring the Buddha Venerables down on us, and neither of us will escape." Even as he spoke, 15 golden figures with terrifying auras suddenly appeared around the Buddhist formation. Each of them was draped in radiant Kasaya robes, and behind them manifested resplendent, majestic temple halls. Among them, an aged monk had the largest and most magnificent temple behind him, within which 3,000 Buddha phantoms could be seen. On the central, Dharma throne sat a Buddha, his entire body gleaming with golden light. That Buddha's eyes were slightly closed, and an aura bordering on the saint realm flowed around him. It seemed as if he only needed to open his eyes to attain Buddhahood on the spot and realize the fruition of the Buddha Tao. The Asura Holy Son's pupils contracted sharply. He gasped, exclaiming, "The Lord of the Buddhist domain, the great Bod, High Buddha Venerable." Among Buddha Venerables, those who could bear the title Great, their realm was not hard to guess. Just like a great venerable in the nascent soul realm, this great Bod, High Buddha Venerable's cultivation had reached the pinnacle among Buddha Venerables, a supreme existence at the peak of the three calamities realm. The Asura Holy Son broke out in a cold sweat. He flashed beside Fang Chen and lowered his voice. "We need to cooperate again. You find a way to release the corrupted blood, and I'll open the world barrier. Otherwise, if I die, you, as an enemy of the Hell Realm, will die an even more terrible death." Fang Chen nodded repeatedly, his expression serious. "You're absolutely right. Mingju, Pingshen, come with me." With a wave of his hand, his power swept the two along, and they instantly teleported away. The Asura Holy Son's eyes flickered as he thought to himself, "Idiot, how could that corrupted blood possibly affect that Buddha Lord?" I'm luring you to divert their attention. You are the foreign enemy who led the invasion from the Middle Kingdom, while I am merely a clansman expelled from the Hell Realm. Who do you think they'll chase? Need I say more? As he pondered, a sharp ripping sound rang out. He had already lifted his hand and torn through space, slicing open the colorful world barrier. His figure flashed as he prepared to slip inside. Unexpectedly, with a dull thud, the world barrier he had just opened suddenly slammed shut. The Asura Holy Son crashed headfirst into the barrier and was violently flung back. He looked back in shock, only to see the Great Bod, High Buddha Lord leading 14 Buddha Venerables, appearing out of thin air around him and surrounding him completely. Wait, why are they all coming after him? The Asura Holy Son quickly cupped his fists and said, "Venerable Buddhas, that Fang Chen is the true foreign enemy who invaded our Middle Kingdom. He carries the mysterious leaf of the Cloud Wilderness Ancient Saint. I implore you to capture him and safeguard the peace of the Hell Realm." A slight spatial fluctuation rippled, and Fang Chen had already brought Yu Mingju and Pingshan Bodhisattva, appearing beside the Buddha Lord via teleportation. He cupped his hands and declared loudly, "Buddha Lord, the Asura Holy Son speaks the truth. You must not let that great demon Fang Chen escape."
Huh.
The Asura Holy Son was instantly stunned, deep shock and suspicion flashing in his eyes. "Fang Chen, what is going on? Is he not afraid of the Hell Realm's powerhouses at all? Isn't the Middle Kingdom still at war with the Hell Realm?" What made his pupils contract again was that the Great Bod, High Buddha Lord, actually pressed his palms together and bowed slightly to Fang Chen, saying, "Many thanks, Special Envoy NG, for delaying this demon for our Buddhist domain." Special Envoy Fang? Delaying him? The Asura Holy Son's mind raced. Recalling the sudden effect of the Truce Monument earlier, his expression drastically changed, and he cried out in shock, "The Hell Realm and the Middle Kingdom have formed an alliance." Seeing his deflated expression, Yu Mingju was utterly delighted. She affectionately took Fang Chen's arm and said with a smug smile, "Not an alliance. Your Hell Realm is now a vassal of our Middle Kingdom." "Why would anyone from the Hell Realm harm my husband? They'll only go after you."
What?
The Asura Holy Son's face changed drastically. Fang Chen's earlier claim that the Hell Realm was their common enemy was all that just a trick. All of this was just to keep him in place, waiting for the Truce Monument's effect to activate, then having the Buddha Venerables surround and kill him. Fang Chen. Realizing he had been duped, the Asura Holy Son flew into a towering rage. He had always been the one scheming against others, but today Fang Chen had turned the tables, playing him like a puppet, luring him deep into the encirclement of the Buddha Venerables to his death. Fang Chen casually waved his hand and smiled, "Don't get excited. You started it, I finished it, we're even. If you have no other last words, you can surrender now and await the Buddhist domain's judgment." The Asura Holy Son's face was as dark as water. He said with a hideous grin, "Surrender, I haven't lost yet." He pointed a finger at Fang Chen's abdomen and coldly shouted, "Have you forgotten that your body still contains something special?" Bloodworm activate. A cruel sneer curled at the corner of his mouth. Could Fang Chen actually believe he could suppress the bloodworm with his own power? The bloodworm he, the Asura Holy Son, had personally refined. How could a mere nascent soul cultivator suppress it? Even the Buddha Lord before him, at the Three Calamities realm, might not have that ability. As long as he gained control of Fang Chen, he could use his life as leverage to force these Buddha Venerables to retreat. Victory, in the end, still falls to those who are prepared. However, at the very moment the bloodworm was activated, Fang Chen sensed it immediately and slapped his palm against his chest. A colorful rooster feather fluttered out gracefully, transforming into an illusory 5-colored giant rooster.